In the old Victorian house at the end of Maple Street, the basement had always been a place of mystery and dread. The house, with its creaky floors and sagging roof, had stood empty for years, its windows shattered by time and neglect. Rumors of its dark past lingered in the town, stories of a family that had vanished without a trace, leaving only shadows and whispers behind. When Isabella moved in, she was eager to start fresh. The house was cheap, and its overgrown garden and peeling paint didn't bother her. It was a fixer-upper, and she relished the challenge. However, the basement, with its rusted lock and heavy door, was a different story. It had an aura of cold, foreboding silence that made her shiver every time she passed by. One rainy evening, as thunder rumbled in the distance, Isabella decided it was time to tackle the basement. The lock gave way with a reluctant creak, and the door swung open, revealing a staircase that descended into darkness. She flicked on the flashlight, its beam cutting through the thick, musty air. The steps were uneven, and the walls, lined with peeling wallpaper, seemed to close in around her. As she reached the bottom, the air grew colder, and a sense of unease settled over her. The basement was cluttered with old furniture, forgotten tools, and boxes filled with yellowed newspapers. In the corner, under a dusty white sheet, lay a large, antique mirror. The glass was clouded with age, but something about it drew her closer. When she lifted the sheet, the mirror's surface rippled like water, and for a moment, Emily thought she saw a shadowy figure flicker within its depths. Suddenly, the light flickered and died, plunging her into darkness. Heart pounding, she fumbled for her flashlight, the beam dancing wildly as she pointed it around the room. That's when she heard it, a soft whisper, almost inaudible, but distinct. "Get out." Isabella's breath caught in her throat. The whisper came again, this time louder, a chilling murmur that seemed to echo off the stone walls. Panic surged through her, and she turned to flee, but the basement door slammed shut with a deafening bang, trapping her inside. The flashlight fell from her grasp, rolling away, leaving her in darkness. Desperate, she felt her way along the wall, her fingers brushing against the rough, cold stone. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, until they became a cacophony of voices, pleading, crying, screaming. Shadows danced at the edge of her vision, shapes moving with unnatural fluidity. Isabella's mind raced, her thoughts tangled in fear and confusion. The basement seemed to breathe, the walls closing in, the floor shifting beneath her feet. Then, she saw them, a group of figures, their forms indistinct, their eyes hollow and mournful. They floated towards her, their hands outstretched, reaching, begging. She tried to scream, but no sound came out. One of them, a woman with hollow eyes and a tear-streaked face, stepped forward. "Help us," she whispered, her voice a ghostly echo. "We're trapped here, cursed for eternity." Isabella's fear turned to sympathy, and she felt an overwhelming urge to help them, to end their torment. She glanced at the mirror, its surface now a swirling vortex of light and shadow. The figures seemed to be drawn to it, their forms fading into the glass. With trembling hands, she reached out, her fingers brushing the cool surface of the mirror. The door creaked open, and she stumbled out, the basement behind her finally quiet. She never spoke of what happened that night, but from then on, she never felt alone in the house. Sometimes, in the dead of night, she would hear a faint whisper, a distant voice, as if the spirits were still there, watching, waiting, grateful for the peace she had given them. And sometimes, just sometimes, she would glance at the mirror, and for a fleeting moment, she would see their shadows, lingering at the edge of her vision, a reminder of the haunted basement's dark secret. As the days turned into weeks, Isabella tried to put the terrifying experience behind her. She focused on renovating the old house, each stroke of paint and every repaired board serving as a distraction from the eerie memory of the basement. Yet, the feeling of being watched never truly left her. Shadows seemed to dance at the edge of her vision, and the whispering voices returned, growing louder each night. One evening, as Isabella was unpacking a box of old books she had found in the attic, she discovered a dusty, leather-bound journal. It belonged to the previous owner, a woman named Margaret who had lived in the house before the family disappeared. Flipping through its yellowed pages, Isabella uncovered a tale of despair and darkness. Margaret wrote about her husband, Jonathan, who had become obsessed with the mirror in the basement. He believed it was a portal to another world, a place where the spirits of the dead were trapped. Margaret's final entry was the most disturbing: Jonathan has vanished. He spent hours in the basement, staring into the mirror. He said he saw them, the souls of the damned, pleading for release. I fear he has gone to join them. The mirror is cursed, a gateway to hell itself. That night, as a storm raged outside, Isabella heard the whispers again, louder and more insistent. She could no longer ignore them. Grabbing her flashlight, she descended into the basement once more. The air was colder than she remembered, and the sense of dread was almost palpable. The mirror stood in the corner, its surface swirling with shadows. Determined to uncover the truth, Isabella approached the mirror. The whispers grew louder, forming words she could finally understand. Help us. Free us. Taking a deep breath, she reached out and touched the mirror. The glass was cold and seemed to pulse beneath her fingers. Suddenly, she was pulled into a vision, her surroundings dissolving into a swirling vortex of light and shadow. She found herself standing in a dark, oppressive void, surrounded by the spirits of the damned. Among them was Jonathan, his eyes hollow and filled with sorrow. Isabella felt a surge of determination. She would not allow these souls to suffer any longer. Back in the basement, she grabbed a heavy hammer from the tool bench. With all her strength, she swung it at the mirror. The glass shattered with a deafening crash, the shards exploding outward in a blinding flash of light. When the light faded, the basement was silent. The oppressive atmosphere had lifted, replaced by an eerie calm. The mirror was gone, its cursed presence obliterated. Isabella felt a sense of relief wash over her. She knew she had done the right thing. But as she turned to leave, she saw a figure standing at the foot of the stairs. It was Margaret, her expression one of gratitude and sorrow. "Thank you," she whispered, before fading into the shadows. From that night on, the house was peaceful. The whispers ceased, and the sense of being watched disappeared. Isabella continued her renovations, transforming the old Victorian house into a warm, welcoming home. She made friends in the town, who marveled at the change in the once haunted house. However, Isabella would never forget the spirits she had encountered or the darkness that had once lingered in the basement. She kept the journal as a reminder of the ordeal and the courage it had taken to face the terror within. And sometimes, on stormy nights, she would sit by the fireplace and listen to the wind, knowing that the souls she had freed were finally at peace.